Reservoir Dogs was released in 2006 for Windows and the PlayStation 2. It was developed by Volatile Games, really just an adult-themed offshoot of Blitz Games, whose CV includes a laundry list of random small-time crap like the Burger King games, Karaoke Revolution, Barbie, and Bratz games, and their first game ever made, Glover, for the N64. Volatile Games themselves have only ever made Reservoir Dogs and, more recently, Dead to Rights Retribution. Sorry, I just threw up in my mouth a little bit. So yeah, this was an irrelevant game, made a decade and a half after its related film, by a studio that has never made anything, staffed by employees from a studio that has never made anything anyone would ever want to play. The cover tries to affect a minimalist, classy look, but some things on the jacket should tip you off that you're not in for a delightful experience. Of the silhouettes on the cover, only Michael Madsen as Mr. Blonde is recognizable. That's because he was the only actor to reprise his role for the game. That's kind of fucking random, isn't it? You'd think of all the people you'd want Tim Roth as Mr. Orange. You need Mr. Orange. Orange is the player, the new guy, the perfect audience proxy, but you only play as him in the training mode. Reservoir Dogs the game makes up for the lack of original actors with the inclusion of original music, with the K-Billy's sounds of the 70s. Which is gonna mean I can't show you, like, any of the actual game footage without muting it because of the licensed music. Thanks, YouTube. Lastly, before we start, we notice that the system requirements table recommends a graphics card with 32 megs of RAM. Good God, is this 1998? Actually, no, it's just an ugly PS2 game from 2006. Upon starting the game, you're greeted by a teeth-grindingly annoying menu screen with endless repetition of one song and a handful of lines delivered by the imitation-grade voice actors. When I turned the music off to capture like I always do, the voices went away too. Win-win. Reservoir Dogs the game is a very beige third-person cover-based shooter with driving levels straight out of Enter the Matrix. The one mechanic that makes it stand out, and is the source of this game's small cult following, is the crowd control system. Paired with a basic karma meter, this basically means you can play the game as a stark raving psycho or a consummate professional. The psycho gameplay is basically just cover-based shooting, which is, in a word, serviceable. Serviceable is not a word you want used to describe your game. Serviceable is best expressed in numbers as a 6 out of 10. It's not as bad as, like, Kane and Lynch, but it certainly ain't good. The guns aren't bad, they sound cool, and for a game with little focus on the shooting mechanic, there's a nice enough variety. You also have a few grenades to spice things up. Smoke grenades, tear gas grenades, and flashbangs are all basically the same thing, they just stun enemies in a small area. Molotovs are the true weapon of the psycho. Yeah. You can take human shields, but that's a component of the coercion mechanic, and they're pretty much worthless in combat. So all tallied up, you can take cover and shoot people, or run around and shoot people. Woo. The game's basics are taught to you in a truly epic training mission where you get weapons training from Mr. Blonde, and then play paintball with the Reservoir Dogs crew. I am serious. Best game ever. This is the only time you play as Mr. Orange, which maybe isn't so bad. He looks like Biff Tanner and sounds like a bitch. I get the feeling they were so worried you wouldn't be able to tell the new character models apart that they gave him orange hair, too. What is this? What is going on here? Why does he have plastic Lego hair? The sound-alikes are pretty much garbage. They do an alright job at the lines taken from the movie, probably because they have a target.
Jesus Christ, Joe. Fucking forget about it. It's beneath me, you know? I'm Mr. Pink. Let's move on.
But even though the game's original dialogue is reasonably well written, it's voiced by a bunch of whiny-sounding imitators. Mr. Pink is the worst. He's kind of funny, and kind of the most obnoxious piece of shit ever.
I am working the cashier's desk. I'm enjoying my 9-to-5 existence in the #1 most dangerous clerical position covered by minimum wage.
Okay, I didn't ask for a running commentary.
In Reservoir Dogs, you play as most of the characters from the film, alternating between third-person shooting levels and driving levels, strung together by cinematics that are identical to the film. I don't mean clips from the film, which might actually be cool. I mean shot-for-shot remakes of the scenes. Not in and of itself a bad thing, except you've got awful character models and terrible voice acting, and they're all so fucking blurry I feel like my eyes are going out of focus. Mr. Blonde is the only one that looks like a real person, and I swear the graphics get temporarily better when he's on screen. As for the driving levels, they're awful. I probably didn't need to say that, right? I mean, you know the driving levels are awful. Every action game with driving levels is automatically an action game with awful driving levels. They're too long, the control is simplistic but still wobbly and imprecise, the physics are half-baked, and they ruin your score if you're going for a pro playthrough. The pro version of the driving levels involves not hitting traffic and driving at high speed, apparently, but the mushy driving physics make not hitting traffic impossible, and sometimes the goal of the driving levels is to destroy pursuing cop cars. In some of them, the only way to get the Psycho rating is to fire your pistol out the window like Yosemite Sam as you drive, and in some levels the only way to get the pro rating is you fucking can't! Because this is a Tarantino-inspired game, the characters have weird monologues they like to indulge in, and since the only time two characters are in the same place as one another is during the driving levels, that's where the quirky Tarantino stories get told. Every time you bump into something or get shot at, one of the characters has to fucking complain about it, which is stupid and it interrupts the story.
You made me lose my place now. Oh yeah. This guy comes up to Raoul in the prison canteen and cuts him right across the throat.
The storyteller then has one or two lines to lead back into the story, which sounds kinda cool. Or it would be, except that you run into things all the time and are constantly under fire from like 4 squad cars and a fucking helicopter, so every story gets interrupted 20 goddamn times by a litany of, "Look out!" and then, "As I was saying" lines, which is really repetitive. Come on, is now really the fucking time to tell a whimsical story? And this isn't even really the point of the game. The focus is on the crowd control mechanic, so why do there have to be so many driving levels? The crowd control mechanic is even really cool, though a bit horribly broken in every way. By targeting an NPC, you can move them around with the mouse and use the action button to make them unlock things, open doors, or have them sit up against a wall to disable them. Regular civilians will obey your orders because you have a gun and guns are scary, but if you want to order the cops around, you need some leverage. That's where the human shields come in. Holding a human shield is enough to get the rent-a-cops to surrender right away, but to get normal cops to surrender, you have to rough up the hostage a bit. Since you can still make armed enemies move, this leads to a funny system where you try to line up as many cops as you can before smacking the hostage up to get them all in one go. Only people in a cone in front of you seem to be affected by the hostage smack maneuver, and every time you hit the hostage they lose health. So it's helpful to get your ducks in a row, so to speak, before you start with the punching. Basically, on pro mode, this becomes a game about telling people what to do, so it appeals greatly to bossy people like me. For every NPC you kill or disable by making them kneel against a wall, you fill up the adrenaline meter, which lets you perform special moves. The Psycho version of the special move is the Bullet Festival, which is basically bullet time. It isn't that useful. If you play pro, you'll probably fire a handful of shots in the whole game, and if you play Psycho, you won't need Bullet Festival, because the combat isn't extraordinarily difficult. It's not like every game needs bullet time. If you have a human shield, though, the special move is to inflict horrific torture on your hostage, causing every enemy in the area to surrender immediately where they stand. Or if they're frail and old, to pass the fuck out. You'll notice that this is the alternative to the Psycho's Bullet Festival mode. Yeah, the signature torture move counts as pro, not Psycho, because you don't kill anybody. So a consummate professional goes through his levels torturing everybody. Every character can do this, which kind of undermines the original Pro vs. Psycho dynamic of the film. Instead of blonde being Psycho and white being professional, it changes based on how you play, and the fact that cold-blooded torture is a professional act makes it more confusing. One of the weapons available on Mr. Blonde's levels is a tranquilizer gun, which breaks the game so hard it's not even funny. A single shot from that thing instantly takes out an enemy, and there's ammo for it everywhere, so you can take out every single enemy in the level from long range with a single shot and then get a pro level. It's almost harder not to get a professional rating in Mr. Blonde's levels. The graphics are a bit bland, but there are some neat effects with tear gas grenades, and overall they're serviceable. The levels aren't special, but they too look serviceable, and at least there's no sewer level. Oh, god damn it. I guess it is kind of cool how you revisit the diamond store multiple times from the perspectives of all the characters, but from different directions as they all make their escape. The design of the levels is actually pretty well thought out. Each area usually has one easily accessible NPC to use as your starter hostage, and sometimes they allow for stealth or alternate paths. There are occasionally obvious arenas where you're supposed to fight large groups of enemies, but you can always opt for the professional mode even against SWAT. They just don't seem to try very hard. Hey, what the fuck is this, Zelda? The levels are also sprinkled with dialogues to overhear between NPCs and radios that play music from the K-Billy Super Sounds of the 70s. It's a nice atmospheric touch, even though I don't like any of the music, but I had to shoot all the radios so the licensed music would stop coming out and putting my YouTube account at risk. That sucked pretty hard because if you fire a gun, every single neutralized police officer in the area gets back up, grabs a gun, and the whole hostage thing begins again. And that shit is boring enough the first time you have to do it. There are two problems with the professional hostage mechanic. First, it's really easy. The game almost always provides you with an unaware cop or civilian to start you off, and you can use that one to create many neutralized NPCs to swap to, continuing the endless chain of bossiness. If you accidentally hit your hostage too many times, or one of the policemen is looking the other way when you hit the hostage and forgets to drop their weapon, it's still child's play to get a fresh hostage. While dive rolling, you can't be hit, so you can dive roll across huge tracts of open ground, taking fire the whole time in order to get right up next to a fresh human shield. On top of all that, pro mode is boring. You move so slowly holding a hostage, and there's almost no challenge to it. It's just an endless procession of surrendering cops, and after your current hostage runs dry, you just trade up to a new one and keep plodding along. This game is way more fun if you play it by ear and just wing it. If you think of Reservoir Dogs as a shooter, where you can take hostages and order people around if things get too intense, it's a lot more fun. It's kind of like a chaotic run-through of Hitman. Playing pragmatically is just more enjoyable. Unfortunately, if you want to see the good or bad endings, you need to pick a mode and stick to it. But pro mode is boring and psycho mode is psychotic.
I think they realized this would be tedious, so they made all the NPCs really annoying to provoke you, like they're trying to make you flip out. It's kind of like Postal 2. They give you all the tools and incentive for wholesale carnage, and then say, don't do it.
You gonna do this all day?
Looks like I'm gonna have to.
This achieves nothing.
But I need it for the good ending. And the achievement.
I'm getting bored of this.
You and me both, pal.
How long are you gonna keep this up?
All day, apparently. Didn't you hear the other guy?
The other thing that makes the game tedious is that the gameplay doesn't change much depending on who you're playing as. They have different lines, which is nice, but only Mr. Blonde really stands out with his quietly menacing delivery, courtesy of Michael Madsen, the only real actor attached to the game.
Go on, make me do things the hard way.
There are a few unique animations like the ones that preface Bullet Festival, which you'll never see because you'll never use Bullet Festival, and there's signature move animations, which you'll never see because the camera pans away in an homage to the film. Mr. Blonde uses his razor, like in the movie, which is to be expected, but the others are weird. Mr. White pulls out a plane ticket and uses it to, whoa, vaporize his hostage. Everyone else just inflicts a savage pistol whipping. Oh no, I've never seen anything so horrible as a pistol whipping before. And still the camera pans away. From a pistol whipping? And that got the game banned in Australia? Oh, right. As boring as the actual game can get, the driving levels never become a welcome diversion. Mr. Brown gets a driving level right after getting shot in the head. I'm sure you can see where this is going. This time you have a time limit based on Brown's increasingly fatal head wound in a sequence that is just unbelievably long. Apparently Mr. Brown drove around for more than 5 minutes after being shot, way off into the hills. Being shot in the head means it gets progressively harder to see as you drive, and yet still he monologues.
Okay, it was Interstate 10. No, wait. No, it was Interstate 5. You know what? It doesn't matter. I was driving down the interstate.
Having to suffer through a driving level after every shooting level is just retarded, especially when the driving is so inexcusably bad. The final driving mission of the game is Nice Guy Eddie protecting Mr. Pink from the cops in a stupidly drawn-out chase sequence that reuses most of the same layout from the other driving missions. This mission is fucking difficult for no good reason. Taking out cars is nearly impossible because of how bad the controls are. Shooting them does next to no damage, and there are no checkpoints in the driving stages.
This is the kind of thing that earns a game an instant failing grade. Not that I don't like this game, because I get a perverse kick out of it, but because the driving level mechanics are so god-awful, so irredeemably bad, that I could never recommend this game to anyone and still get a good night's sleep.
Even after demystifying the events of the film and expanding the off-screen bits to cartoonish proportions, you never play the heist, only the aftermath. Probably because they couldn't think of a way for you to play alongside NPCs, or the engine couldn't handle that many character models at once. The game had a real opportunity to show the heist, the training, the setup, etc. Instead, they make the events of the film seem stratospherically impossible. I seriously doubt they could even reach the warehouse without a million cops in pursuit if they had to run multiple fucking police roadblocks to get there. Overall, though, Reservoir Dogs is compelling in a very weird Enter the Matrix way. The hostage and crowd control mechanic is the kind of thing you don't see that often, like the Punisher's interrogation mechanic. There's just a bunch of weird, random shit that goes wrong with this game, like the loading screens, which have quotes from characters who are dead by the end of the film. Quotes about the events of the film. When did they have time to give these statements, and to who? Also, the way it fills in events from the film just seems weak and underwhelming. Like what happened to Mr. Blue. Well, it turns out he had a last stand in front of the diamond store, but then survived that and ran a few blocks to go to a movie theater, where he finally got shot while trying to have a smoke. The crazy additions to the story kind of detracts from the experience, especially when it's just so ludicrous.
There you go, Reservoir Dogs the game. Easily the best game ever licensed from a Tarantino film. Though it's also the only game ever licensed from a Tarantino film. Make of that what you will, and don't forget to never spend money on this grotesque amalgamation of bad game design choices. See you next time.
Wow. let me go. You better 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 let me go. Clear over here. Doesn't seem to
Get to cover. Okay, boys, open fire.